251.
Ow.
252.
Ow.
I told Cody here to make my website look great. And when I went to check it out, it said he made 404 errors. That means 404 whacks. 253.
Ow. I should have used Squarespace. Ow.
Throughout the late 50s and 60s, one extraordinary person was climbing their way through the ranks of television. Her name was Joan Gans Cooney. As a public television producer, she was creating some of the most provocative and challenging programming of the civil rights era on New York's public television station, WNDT. At a dinner party in 1966, a conversation between her and Lloyd Morissette, an executive at the notable nonprofit, the Carnegie Corporation, sparked an interesting question. Could television be used to teach children? Complaints of the abundance of sex and violence on television, as well as the influence of advertisements, had brought upon a national debate as to the negative effects these trends could be having on the children watching. There were a few popular programs directed at young children, such as Captain Kangaroo, but shows such as this were the outliers. While the entertainment aspects of these programs were great, the execution of the educational aspects was lacking. Morissette, who was also an experimental psychologist, wondered if a program designed primarily to educate children could be successful. Gans Cooney, known for never being afraid to step outside of her comfort zone, found the proposition interesting. After the conversation, she secured research funding for an educational children's program. She spoke to many experts in the field of early childhood development and educational media. When she returned with her report, titled The Potential Uses of Television in Preschool Education, WNDT rejected it. After this, she left the station, joining Morissette at the Carnegie Corporation in a full-time role. Over the next 2 years, Gans Cooney and Morissette sought funding for their program, starting the nonprofit production company, the Children's Television Workshop. The two would eventually raise over $8 million for the show, spending a large amount on research alone. Gans Cooney would be appointed as the executive director of the Children's Television Workshop, a monumental achievement in the male-dominated and biased television industry. She and Morissette would begin to grow their team, eventually adding television writer and director John Stone to help with the show's creative development. It became clear through the research process that in order to capture the attention of preschool children, the program would need to be fast-paced, visually colorful, and creative in its execution. Gans Cooney pointed to television commercials as a comparable to the type of segments the show would need to have. Luckily, if she needed high-quality creative commercials, Stone knew the perfect person to do it.
Hello there. My name is Jim Henson, and I'm a puppeteer. I'm called a puppeteer because I work with puppets.
Okay, you're going to love this story. Greatest story in the world. Hey, thank you, and welcome again to another Muppet Show.
In the summer of 1968, it was business as usual at Muppets Inc., now operating under the new name Henson Associates. The company was still producing entertaining commercials for a variety of clients. Jim and his team continued to appear on variety shows performing Muppet skits, and the Muppets were creating the occasional television special and pilot. Two pilots, 1962's Tales of the Tinker-D and 1964's The Land of the Tinker-D, featuring a group of medieval Muppets in a fairy tale kingdom, never saw the light of day. In 1965, Jim had been asked to bring the Muppets onto a pilot for a Snow White parody being developed by John Stone for CBS. Jim and Stone hit it off, and the duo would collaborate on other projects, including an episode for NBC's Experiment in Television, a program that was satisfying Jim's passion for experimental film. Now, in mid-1968, they were a few months away from shooting the project that came from the Snow White parody, although the program had moved from CBS to ABC and the leading princess had been changed to Cinderella. After Stone joined the Children's Television Workshop, he would not hesitate to invite Jim to some of the developmental meetings. Jim shyly sat in the back of the conference room, slouching low in his chair as he would often do. When he was finally introduced to Gans Cooney, his work preceded him. Jim's quiet nature was overshadowed by the Muppets' reputation for the loud and the chaotic, and those at CTW, especially Gans Cooney, were thrilled that he might bring that energy to their new show. Jim, on the other hand, was hesitant. If he provided the Muppets for the preschool program, he could risk the thing he wanted most, a primetime Muppet series. Using the Muppets for the young demographic could solidify their reputation as children's entertainment, a verdict that would be detrimental to any pitch for a family or adult-style Muppet show. However, this concern was overshadowed by the mere fact that he respected what Gans Cooney and CTW was doing. They were pushing the boundaries of television, a personal goal of his as well. Plus, he couldn't deny that the format that they were describing was perfect for him and the Muppets. He eventually agreed to work for the show, believing that, due to the unpredictable nature of children's programming, it would probably only last a month or two anyways. Jim demanded his typical condition, that he own the rights to any Muppet characters he created for the program. During negotiations, Jim would end up allowing a 50-50 split of any character merchandising from the show between him and CTW. Henson and his team would begin in 1969, and Jim and Stone's Cinderella spoof was set to film in late 1968. The hour-long special, called Hey Cinderella, received mixed reviews when it aired in the spring of 1969. The most notable part of the special would be that it officially completed Kermit's transition from abstract monster to frog, a gradual transformation in design that produced the recognizable version of the beloved character.
I know I'm a frog. You don't have to keep reminding me.
Throughout 1969, Jim and his team worked to produce their scenes for the CTW project. The Muppets would create small insert segments teaching children about letters and numbers that would then be placed in between the show's street segments, which featured the main storyline of human actors. Jim took creative liberty with his part of the show, not only creating Muppet segments, but shooting live action and animated sequences as well. One of the first assignments for Henson was to create the pitch reel for the show, which had recently been given the name Sesame Street.
Hey, these kids can't read or write, can they?
No,
Then how's about we call the show Hey Stupid?
Hey, stupid. What are we going to do for a title?
Hey, Ralph,
Hmm?
why don't you call your show Sesame Street?
My entire career as a TV educator nipped in the... What was that? Kermit. Why, you're a genius. Mwah. Yeah. Sesame Street. I love it. The kids will love it. I can see it. Up there in lights, the Children's Television Workshop presents Sesame Street.
New Muppets would need to be created for the puppet segments of Sesame Street. Two of the residents would be a pair of roommates named Bert and Ernie, performed by Frank Oz and Jim respectively. The gruff, stern Bert would be constantly pestered by the squeaky-voiced, goofy Ernie, not unlike the more serious Oz and the often goofy Henson. The comedic relationship between Ernie and Bert was immediate, likely because Oz and Henson's friendship was so strong. A semi-new character was a blue, googly-eyed monster with a large appetite performed by Oz utilizing a painfully gravelly voice. The character had evolved from previous Muppets that the team had used in various commercials throughout the years, and throughout the first season of Sesame Street, he would be given the name Cookie Monster. Kermit would also be used in many segments to teach concepts, acting as one of the few mature Sesame Street Muppets. A few test cuts of the show were created using Jim's segments and other footage shot by CTW, and the episodes were shown to the show's target demographic. These early tests revealed that children's attentions dropped significantly during the show's street segments in which only human actors were shown. It was then decided that Muppets would need to be added to the main setting of the program. This wasn't exactly good news for Jim. He could easily provide the show's inserts, as he could create them in bulk on his own shooting schedule. But becoming members of a cast would mean a more strenuous time commitment. He could assign his fellow performers Frank Oz or Jerry Nelson to the post, but they had proven to be indispensable in the Muppets' year-round work on various projects. This meant Jim needed new talent. So as he had done year after year, he returned to the Puppeteers of America convention, this time seeking out a young puppeteer named Carol Spinney, who he had met a few years prior. He convinced Spinney to come work on Sesame Street full-time, performing two characters for the street segments, a large childlike yellow bird named Big Bird, and a grumpy, trash-dwelling orange monster named Oscar the Grouch. The position was perfect for Spinney, as he seemed to excel in solo performances as opposed to a member of an ensemble. He set up shop in New York in 1969, and he would immediately give life to the full-bodied Big Bird puppet, performing him as a naive, curious character that children could relate to, at the urging of Jim, who thought the character could be very popular with the audience. Popular would be an understatement. Sesame Street premiered on November 10th, 1969 on National Educational Television. The show instantly became popular among the young children tuning in, and it would start a national dialogue on the roles and responsibilities of children's entertainment. The show featured a diverse cast of human characters, and it would have to overcome widespread racism and prejudice. But the decision to feature a realistic cast was one of the show's best. There were a few critics of the show during its first few months on the air, but the consensus seemed to be that Sesame Street was a groundbreaking and incredible show, one that would remain on the air and in the minds of children for years to come. This was great news for everyone except Jim Henson. While he was thrilled the show was successful and was even more happy to see his 50% of merchandising sales over the next few years, the popularity of Sesame Street, largely thanks to his and the Muppets' contributions, had realized his worst fear. He was now a children's puppeteer. This wouldn't become an issue right away. as he made plans to capitalize off of Sesame Street's success with other Muppet specials for children. When he would eventually try to step outside of this demographic, he would learn just how strong of a reputation Sesame Street had given him. With the flexibility of the show's shooting schedule thanks to Spinney's work, Jim pursued a script for a children's special written by Jewel entitled The Great Santa Claus Switch, in which an evil magician takes Santa's place on Christmas Eve to steal from homes. The script had been rejected countless times over the past few years, but to Jim's delight, Ed Sullivan, who had frequently invited the Muppets on his program, offered to air the special in place of an episode of the show. The good news meant that Henson would have to hire additional puppeteers, and in the summer of 1970, Oz, Nelson, and Henson opened auditions for additional Muppet performers. This resulted in 2 new puppeteers joining the team, Fran Brill and Richard Hunt. Both were a perfect fit for the Muppets. The Great Santa Claus Switch saw the introduction of a group of monsters named the Frackles as the henchmen for the film's villain. These would continue to be used in other Muppet works, and one Frackle, referred to as the Cigar Box Frackle, would eventually evolve a knack for adrenaline. The Great Santa Claus Switch was well received.